This week we'll be talking about verbs and adverbs. So, what is a verb? Verbs are words that signify an action or state of being. They are dynamic verbs that form what's called the muscle of the language, as one researcher described that, and that's because a sentence cannot exist without a verb. You can have a verb sentence with only a verb, but you can't have a sentence with only a noun because the noun has to do something. So, verbs can stand alone in sentences. And they carry the muscle of the language that tell us what's actually happening. Verb classes. There's the main verbs, the principal descriptor of an action or state of being. There's auxiliary verbs, which are helping verbs. They are conjoined with main verbs to clarify action, state of being depicted by a main verb. Cannot stand alone. So these are the be verbs, helping verbs. Be, have, do. Auxiliary verbs can be modals. They provide information about certainty, intention, command, and emphasis, and there are 11 core modals. There's I'm really not sure how to say this, canatives. They're informal variations of modals have to, want to, and got to. And that's because when the children started initially saying it's have to, got to, want to, and actually they probably never stop saying it if they're in the South. But they should be considered an early developing linguistic structure instead of a verb plus the infinitive form of to. Then we have V verbs, which appears to be vulnerable to difficulty for children and adults with language disorders. But you also need to remember that it might be related to dialect, as these are often deleted with children and adults and speakers of Southern English and African American English. So there's a lot of research out there on that you'll discuss further in your studies. There's the copula, which is the be verbs, which are functionally equivalent to the copula that can serve as a main verb. So she is a girl. Catherine will talk. Catherine may. I'm sorry, that's the wrong page. The wrong examples. She is a girl. I am happy. I am leaving. She is not. Sally is not my friend. These are all examples found on page 48. So when it stands alone, if it's not modifying something or helping something, rather it's copula. Now the auxiliary verbs that can be conjugated across 12 tenses, which can be found in table 3.1. There's simple present, simple past, simple future. Then there's present progressive, past progressive. Then there's present perfect, past perfect, and future perfect. And then copulas and auxiliaries can occur in uncontracted or contracted forms. Okay, so verb types and verb forms. A verb type, we have transitive verbs, which require an object, and intransitive verbs, which may stand alone without an object. And so you have some verbs that are used as transitive and intransitive depending on their use in a particular sentence. Intransitive verbs, again, they stand by themselves. They don't need an object. No action or say is carried over from a verb to an object. He sleeps, she dreams. Versus a transitive verb, the example is Jonathan kicked. What did Jonathan kick? You have to have something that comes after the verb that follows the verb, that object that it's modifying. So transitive and intransitive verbs are important to analyze in syntax, because if you have someone who is using a transitive verb that requires an object but not using the object, then it's going to be a lot of loss of clarity in their communication. And you can see this with language disordered students sometimes. Then we have verb forms that include time, intention, and number. Now, of course, number, that's pretty simplistic. It's singular versus plural. So your verb tense is going to change depending on whether it's one person or one entity versus more than one. But this is a very difficult task for language disordered children. We also see this as characteristics of dialect. So plurality is not always marked. They'll say, in a dialect speaker will say, he go to the store versus he goes. And that's an error in the verb form of plurality of the number. So it is very important to give consideration to the number and also consider the dialect of the speaker who is omitting those plural forms, because we see that plural forms and past tense forms are often deleted in language disordered children, as well as that copula B. And then we have person, which is reflecting who or what is completing the action. So it changes versus first person, second person, and third person. First person, of course, being I, second person being you, your, and third person being he, she, they, etc. So let's look at verb tense now. It refers to the time of an action or state of being. You have present tense occurring right now. Past tense occurred previously, of course, usually marked by the ed. For irregular verbs, that would be different, but they have past tense formations. And then future tense, it will occur. It hasn't happened yet, but it will happen. Now, the verb stem, which is that the base of the verb, what is being modified and what's being changed, it's modified by changing its spelling, ending, or adding auxiliary verbs. So you have simple present, simple past, and simple future tenses. I work, you work. I'm sorry, this form. I'm getting off of my pages. It rains every day. It rained Sunday. It will rain tomorrow. Okay, so that's simple. There's the only modification is that rain being the stem verb. It has the S added to M for the present tense, has the ed added for the past tense, and it has for the future tense, it has the will added to it. So there are always going to be additions to reflect verb tense usually when you're doing this. So just think about all it requires for a student to remember to say it rains versus it rained. And we do see deletions of simple present tense forms such as that S on the end in speakers of dialect and in language disorder children. So you have to really carefully analyze the speaker's background knowledge and exposure to different types of verb forms. So beyond simple present, past, and future tense, we have present progressive, past progressive, and future progressive tense. And this uses the present participle of ing. So you add ing to the word, rain becomes raining. It is raining now, being present progressive. It was raining yesterday, past progressive. It will be raining tomorrow. So that is the future tense. So that is how present progressive form occurs, and this is often an early skill you work on with your language disorder children. I'm working with a student right now on adding present progressive plus ing form to everything, because right now when she sees an action where he walk, he run, he jump, and she's not saying he walking, which would be the next step before he is walking with that copula B modifier. And we have present perfect, past perfect, and future perfect tense, which makes things very complicated because we haven't mastered this in Southern dialect. We often delete those present tense forms. I'm sorry, those perfect tense forms in our Southern dialect. So present perfect, Linda has missed the plane. They have eaten. Past perfect, by the time she got to the airport, Linda had missed the plane. They had eaten. And then future perfect, she will have missed a plane. They will have already eaten. So it happens in the past, but it generally suggests the verb happened before some other action or state of being. So if you look at these sentences such as they had eaten before they left the house. This is on page 56 in the example. Had eaten is the past perfect tense because you have that additional clause of they left the house. So it happened before. It is suggesting something that happened in addition to another state or action. And it's used form using the past participle plus ed. Now, voice refers to whether the subject is doing the action or receiving the action. An active voice is the emphasis of a sentence on the subject as the doer of an action. And passive voice, you will remember from all of your English writing whenever your teacher would say, don't write in passive voice. The emphasis of the subject is as a recipient of the action. So instead of saying Miguel is eating the apple, you say the apple is eaten by Miguel using passive voice. And it's not very clearly communicated in your writing often when you use passive voice because there's a better way to say it to make it more direct and explicit. But we will see this in writing. We'll see this in conversation. So it can really throw language disorder children for a loop because when they see passive voice, they hear the apple is being eaten or the apple is by Miguel. They delete those extra words in there because it's too much for them to process and comprehend. So there are reversible and irreversible passive sentences, and reversible sentences are more difficult to comprehend. So if you can say it in passive voice and active voice, that's more difficult for the students to comprehend because, again, the working memory load is greater. For mood, it depicts the speaker's state of mind or level of intention. So you have the indicative mood, which is used when one is stating a fact or requesting information. You have the imperative mood, used to give a comma or make a request. And then you have subjunctive mood, which is used in dependent clauses that follow independent clauses, expressing wishes and demands or conditions that are improbable, doubtful, or contrary to the fact. And I love this example. I wish I were a little bit taller. I think the author's throwing it back to that old song. I wish I were a little bit taller. I wish I were a baller. That has to be that reference, knowing the author of this book. But anyway, you should remember subjunctive mood if you remember, I wish I were a little bit taller. I wish I were a baller. I wish I had a girl. I wish I would call her. Sorry. Okay, verbals, infinitives. Those are characterized by the to plus the verb. So I'm going to walk to the store. I'm going to run to the store. They can be used as nouns, adjectives, and adverbs, which makes them very complex and very difficult for language disordered children to comprehend. Now, and then you also have the bare infinitive where the word to is omitted, but it's still an infinitive. So the example of the book is help Ruby get the coffee ready, because help is your main verb. And then get is really a part of to get. Help Heather prepare the manuscript instead of saying help Heather to prepare the manuscript. And of course, to be more efficient in our speech, we're deleting the to, but that can be challenging for language interventionists and for language disorder students because they don't understand who is doing what action. Because help, and help Ruby get the coffee, the understand subject is you. It doesn't say you help Ruby get the coffee, but it is a command and it's telling you to do something. So that's an understood subject, and then going directly into the verb and causing it to be really two clauses instead of just one. Now, gerunds, we discussed this in the last book too. They use the form of the present participle, which is plus ing, to take the place of a noun or a pronoun in a sentence. They can be preceded by the or followed by of. The handling of wild animals is for experts. Cleaning is not my favorite activity. The only thing he doesn't like is cooking. So it's because when a noun, a verb becomes a noun, is a gerund. And then we have participles, present participle and past participle. We've been talking about them already. They can occur either present or past tense. Present participles formed by adding ing to the verb stem and is used to form the progressive tenses. Past participle is formed by adding ed and is used to form the perfect tenses. So if you remember, present participle, present is progressive, present progressive participle. That's not exactly the order or way it's said, but those are the ones that go together. And then past perfect participle, or perfect equals past participle. The perfect tense is always going to have the past in it. The progressive tense is always going to have the present in it. Now, let's look at the developmental notes. So, how are verbs developing? Of course, children's earliest words typically include a variety of simple verbs or action words, and the development follows shortly after nouns. So, go, want, eat, drink. Those are all some early action words. Now, verbs gain ground in the second year and begin to take on more of an important role in everyday language use as the children's vocabulary develops. Appearance of two-word utterances around 18 months of age feature a combination of action words with nouns. So we often call this agent plus action or action plus agent. Or action plus object rather. So action plus object would be want juice. Agent plus action would be he bite, cat bite, dog bite. Sorry, using the baby as an example. Around 2.5 years of age, when your mean length of utterance, or MLU, moves beyond 2.0, so that means that that's a two-word length of utterance. Average utterance that a child says is 2 words. You select agent, action, or agent, object. You have the inflected verbs appear, usually plus ing, that present progressive tense. Around 31 to 34 months, present and future tense auxiliary forms emerge. Between 35 and 40 months, children begin to use regular past tense verbs and modals, as well as auxiliary forms of be plus present progressive. So he is walking versus just he walking, which is the initial development. Children frequently overextend regular past tense rules to irregular verbs through age 5 and even beyond. So if you have a child going, say he goed to the store instead of he went to the store, that's not uncommon. And then between 4 and 5 years, children begin to use past tense of be forms as the copula and auxiliary verbs. During preschool, verbs constitute about 25% of the total words. By adolescence, about 30% of total words used for verbs. That's increasing a little bit. The use of the be verbs as auxiliaries increase with age. Children understand simple action words before they understand more complex actions or stated beings, and these would be more metalinguistic terms. By high school, the children's understanding of metalinguistic verbs is not fully complete, so they're still having difficulty understanding terms such as think, know, and suppose. Between 7.5 and 8 years, 90% of children comprehend reversible passive sentences, which we said was very difficult for our children with language disorders. So if a 7.5, 8-year-old comprehends it 90% of the time, then, or 90% of 7.5, 8-year-olds comprehend it, it's going to probably take at least to age 9, if not 10, for our language disorder children to start comprehending those types of sentences. And then that 80% of them can produce reversible passive sentences. Now, children move gradually from extra-linguistic means for expressing negation to linguistic means. So extra-linguistic being shaking the head no, or, other types of nonverbal communication children use before they form the words. But usually in the first 50 words is the word no. And I can definitely speak that to my 19-month-old, that no was one of her first words that she learned, and overuse of the word no. So then you have stages of negation. Stage 1, there are negative markers are located at the peripheral of sentences. They're also referred to as external negative markers. And no wanted, eat, bite, no, not go by me. Cecile said, no bite, no bite. No bite, kitty, no bite. If the cat bites her or her friend bites her. Then stage 2, the negative markers are moved internally and negations marked without the use of auxiliaries. They begin to use contracted verbs. So I don't, I can't, I won't. Then by stage 3, the negative markers are marked with auxiliaries, and there are more diverse contractions, such as I can't do it, I won't help, I will not do it. And the last ones that form are wouldn't, couldn't, and shouldn't, which all involve modal auxiliaries around 40 to 46 months. So let's move on into adjectives. The adjectives serve as the descriptors of language. They're modifiers of pronouns and nouns that are important for narrowing down the qualities and properties of the nouns and pronouns that they modify. Now, adjectives are an open class of words, meaning that we can add new adjectives, and adjectives can fall out of favor, such as I'm thinking groovy and gnarly and things like that we used a lot in the 80s have fallen out of favor, but other adjectives have become new online. Selfie, although it's not really an adjective, it's a noun. But other things, we're adding adjectives to our language constantly and removing things based on how our language is developing. Then we have descriptive adjectives, which describe a quality of the noun or pronoun that they modify. And we have limiting adjectives, which there are 9 specific types of limiting adjectives. There are proper adjectives, possessive adjectives, demonstrative adjectives, cardinal adjectives, ordinal adjectives, nouns, uses adjectives, definite and indefinite articles, indefinite adjectives, and interrogative adjectives, which we will talk about throughout the rest of the PowerPoint. Now we have simple adjectives, which are just adjectives used as simple words. So that seems pretty simple in itself. Tacky, experimental, shrill. There's nothing to add to it. Then we have compound adjectives. They're formed by combining 2 words into one. That's one way of forming a compound adjective. They can be formed by hyphenating 2 words, or they can be formed by using 2 closely related words together without combining or hyphenating them. such as child development, Supreme Court, high school. So those are beyond the simple adjectives, the types of compound adjectives. And those are all considered descriptive adjectives versus the limiting adjectives are different types. So what are the types of limiting adjectives? We have positive adjectives, which can be reflected to create the comparative and superlative forms. They're gradable, meaning they happen along a continuum. They're modified to compare two or more entities along the continuum. The comparative degree is usually formed by adding the suffix of at the end, but it also can be formed by adding more or less. Then you have superlative degree, which is comparing three or more nouns or pronouns, and formed by adding the suffix of s to the end of the words, or most least. Then you have some adjectives that are considered non-gradable adjectives, meaning they cannot be modified to the comparative or superlative form because they describe all or no qualities. I had it's perfect, square, plastic are the examples they use. You can't have the most perfect day because perfect's not modifiable. I think of the word pregnant. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. Although sometimes you'll hear people say she's just a little pregnant. But that's really not a gradable adjective. It's considered non-gradable. Now, descriptive adjectives, they describe a quality of the noun pronoun that they modify. We have attributive adjectives, which most often precede nouns. They give you an attribute of the noun, like tall or short. We have predictive adjectives, which can follow a copula and intransitive verbs to modify nouns and pronouns serving as subjects. The girl in my class is tall. She seems sad. We have subject complements or nominal predicates, as they're also referred to. And that is when adjectives follow a copula or intransitive verb. So many descriptive adjectives can be recognized by the presence of an adjectival suffix and by considering their meaning and what they are modifying. So we talked about this last time in morphology, talking about morphological awareness and how the suffixes are changing their meaning and making them adjectives. So we know ly or y endings, but you have the al endings, actual, adjectival, us ending like conscious, glorious, serious, wondrous, why, easy, nasty, pretty, savory. So these are all common suffix endings that are coming probably from that Latin influence that we have. And so that is how we recognize them as an adjective, though, because of their endings of the suffix. They can directly follow the noun they modify, and they can even occur without a noun, like feed the hungry. Pay attention to the obvious. Now we have limiting adjectives, the types of adjectives that are, as it says, limiting. They modify nouns by focusing on how much, how many, whose, and so on. They include parts of speech that take on adjective roles, causing us difficulty when analyzing, because when trying to determine an individual's adjective in syntactic analysis, we have to know whether it is acting as a noun, acting as an adjective, acting as a verb. So the parts of speech that we've already discussed can take on other roles. Pronouns can become adjectives. So, excuse me. So that makes it difficult when we're analyzing the speech of a child to know where their strengths and deficits are and how we're going to address it. Now, limiting adjectives can also be determiners. They're determining what what type of entity that they're modifying it is, and we'll discuss that more into chapter 6. So in next week's discussions, let's just stick to the limiting adjectives and their properties. First, we have proper adjectives. These are common adjectives that are descriptive and general in meaning, or proper adjectives are not common adjectives. Common, they're descriptive and general in meaning, but proper adjectives are very specific. They are limiting and refer to distinct entities. So the name of a specific computer like Apple or Mac, Shakespearean, Spanish. Those are considered proper adjectives. They usually have to be capitalized. Possessive adjectives are when common and proper nouns are used to signify possession. They can also be referred to as determiners. You will see a commonality about which ones can be determiners. So it's the man's ferret. Don't eat all of Janet's cookie. His hair is a wreck. So it's possessive. You show the possession on the noun by adding that apostrophe S. And then you have certain pronouns that are considered possessive pronouns. We have demonstrative adjectives, and they're the same pronouns that were demonstrative pronouns. This, that, these, and those. And so they're adjectives when they're describing something or modifying a noun or a pronoun or a specific entity or state of being. So this boy is walking, or he is walking this way, versus this is what we'll do. If you say this is what we do, this is the pronoun. We have cardinal adjectives, which are referring to numbers. They're counting numbers that modify a noun or pronoun by stating how many: 1, 2, 3, 4, 20, 100, 1,000. And they are determiners that are quantifiers. They quantify by giving it a number. Then we have ordinal adjectives. It's easy to remember the name ordinal because ordinal is talking about order. And it has that AL suffix ending added to the word order, the root word of order. So ordinal is numbers that denote the order of a noun pronoun in a series. It's a quantifier type of a determiner, but it's going to be first, second, third, last, fourth, etc. We have more limiting adjectives. We have nouns used as adjectives, which nouns can be used as adjectives if they modify another noun or pronoun. It's in my top desk drawer. Could you hand me my coffee cup? We have definite and indefinite articles, a, and the, which can serve as an adjectival role, but they are considered articles in syntactic analysis. So it depends on what type of analysis you're conducting and how you want to analyze it. But they are basically dual roles. The and a and an are articles. They're also adjectives because they're modifying something. The boy. The is modifying boy because it's telling you which boy to pay attention to. We have indefinite adjectives, which can serve as either pronouns or adjective based on their function in the sentence. It is adjective when it modifies the noun or the pronoun. So these are examples are few, much, many, more, most, never, and some. And again, we discussed this, or it was discussed rather, in Chapter 2. So it refers you back to page 31 for the indefinite adjectives that are also can be pronouns and used as pronouns. And so it becomes an adjective when it modifies something. Nancy has several, indefinite pronoun, versus Nancy has several dogs, indefinite adjective, because several is modifying dogs. Excuse me. Now we have the interrogative adjectives, which of course interrogative begin a question. These are question words. Whose, which, and what serve adjective roles when they modify nouns. So whose sister is in my class. That whose sister, who's modifying sister. When you're not asking a question, you're saying it as a statement. Whose is this? Interrogative pronoun versus whose pencil is this? Which did you say you wanted? Interrogative pronoun versus which hat did you say you wanted? So when you become more specific and modifying a noun, it becomes an interrogative. Pronoun becomes an interrogative adjective. Then we have sequencing adjectives, which are order of adjectives. They most know this naturally. And this is generally the order you have adjectives. You have the limiting adjective / determiner, the opinion quality, plus the size, plus the shape, plus the condition or age, plus the color, plus the pattern, plus the material, plus the origin, and then finally the noun use adjective. But of course, we're not going to string 8 to 10 adjectives together to modify a noun. We're only going to string about 2 to 3. Really, beyond 4, that's just maxed out. We can't handle the amount of working memory load that requires. So, developmental notes on adjectives. The first 50 words contain several modifiers, including descriptive adjectives, but only about 10% of the words. I know one of Cecile's first adjectives, and Kennedy's too, rather, was more, because we were doing the sign more. And it was so funny. The other day at daycare, she wanted they give them a skittle in the office if they use their manners. At the end of the day, so they have to say please, and they say get a skittle, and they say thank you. And of course, as a 18, 19-month old, her please and thank yous are sporadic. But if we pass the office more than once leaving daycare, she's going to walk in twice and she's going to ask for more. And the day she's going more or mo, one, mo. So she was using two adjectives versus the first one was just the more. And she's even doing the fingers, holding up one and then doing the sign for more. And one day she got it, and one day she didn't. And needless to say, the days she did not get it, she was not happy because she doesn't understand when she asks for more why she doesn't get it. Because she's always been rewarded for saying more as a type of communication. So we're moving into the next stage of communication development. 18 months of age, again, Cecile's age, there's early two-word combos reflect moderate use of adjectives, which are attributes. Some other things Cecile has said. Oh, today the cat we have was outside. And she calls him cat. Sometimes cat. And she was like cat inside. Cat inside. She wasn't saying come inside. She might have said go though. Cat go. Cat go. And then she added inside at the end. And I was really thrilled because that's the first time I've heard her say inside. Of course, it doesn't sound exactly like we say it. It's more like inside, cat, inside. So a lot about communication, especially in the early development, is all about the interpretation. But that's how they're learning to communicate. And some other things that she has said as far as early adjectives: cold, it wet. And so we're not quite to the next level, which is the three-word combinations, which follow similar patterns, with their opposites being acquired a short time later. So if it's cold, the opposite would be hot. Wet, of course, being dry. But usually the pattern follows noun, adjective, noun, adjective, noun, demonstrative, adjective, noun. And of course, nouns can be replaced by pronouns. So as we're nearing that, we're about to enter the syntactic boom. This is Cecile's age. And so as that develops, I'll be sure to continue to share her expansions as examples for what language development looks like. Now, around 3 years of age, four-word utterances produce more complex patterns of adjectives and determiners. So you have preposition plus article determiner plus adjective plus noun in the little house. But then through the preschool years, children refine understanding of joining adjectives in a series and positioning of adjectives within complex noun phrases. So learning more about the order. Learning that it's going to be the big boy ran versus the boy big ran. We're not going to put the adjective after the noun, typically, depending on the type of adjective and modifier it is. And you can think of Yoda speech and how Yoda talked, and he didn't have a good syntactic understanding of where the adjectives should be placed because they always followed the noun. Adjectives comprise 15% of language in early childhood, then about 20% in school-age children. By age 9, children begin to have understanding of the meaning of derivational suffixes such as et, eyes, full, like, and able, but they have full understanding of the suffix less. Now, that's important to note because in Common Core, even in kindergarten, they're talking about root words and being able to tell the meaning of an unknown word by using clues from suffixes, prefixes, and suffixes they know. And that doesn't mean that a child has to know less is a suffix or what it means, but if you hear the word homeless, what do you think that means? And you expect the child to say, well, that means they have no home or without a home based on their other knowledge of the word less, but they don't have full understanding by age 9. So there's lots of considerations to be given for the standards that we're setting for children and expectations for school versus what's actually developmentally appropriate. And that's something you as the SLP need to communicate as the expert in these areas. But I will say, too, that morphological awareness, and you'll get this more in your studies later, has been shown to be effective. Morphological awareness instruction has been shown to be effective in young elementary age students, so even younger than 2nd grade. So just because they don't necessarily have the mastery of the skill. Doesn't mean it's not appropriate to teach it and introduce it and use it. I know I'm using it all the time with Kennedy and giving her these concepts to try to help increase her knowledge of word meanings and how to use contextual clues from words to derive the meaning of unknown words. So that's just a little side note about those developmental notes. This is developmental notes. Again, that's what's considered average by the standards of the research and how many children they use, what parts of the country they represented. There's lots of factors there, so we need to give all that consideration when we're talking about developmental norms versus the curriculum standards and expectations. Now, by age 13, the adolescent comprehends derivational suffixes at a level approaching adult understanding, but still their use of suffixes is less accurate than adults.